Okay, and then I'm going to share my screen. For those who may be watching the recording, just a quick reminder, my name is Johanna Byrd, Executive Director of NASW-PA. I use she, her pronouns, and also presenting will be Kristie King.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name's Kristie Jo King, President of NASW Pennsylvania. Also she, her pronouns. Welcome and thank you for being with us tonight.
Okay. And do not need to see my email, but let's see. I wanted to share first just the flyer that we had for tonight. Sierra McNeil had like sick dog emergency, so is not able to join us tonight, but that's okay too. But that's kind of the agenda as we go down for today. We'll be just doing some quick introductions, talking a little bit about LEAD, giving some testimonials, what to expect. We have a little bit of an advocacy training. We'll talk more about the issue that we're going to cover at this year's LEAD, and then wrap up. So Kristie, what is LEAD and why do we do it?
LEAD is one of my very favorite events, and I always tell everyone it's like my favorite day to be a social worker. And I will definitely get more into that a little bit later. But what LEAD is, LEAD stands for Legislative Education and Advocacy Day. This is an event that we've been doing for NASW Pennsylvania for several years, decade now. It's also done at the national level and other state chapters. It's a day where we go and talk to where we're intentional about going collectively to talk with our legislators and talk to them about issues that are important to us as social workers. Some years we really focus on certain aspects of legislation that we're really trying to push for. In the past, it was title protection, BSW licensure. We've talked about telehealth bills.
Telehealth, right. School social work certification, quite a few things that, are now law, like title protection, practice protection, the school social work certification, and some of the others. And then other pieces, even if we didn't, create it as a law, it is like somehow or another been like woven into policy or pieces of other laws.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how we collectively can come together and really be the voices for change, voices for big things to happen here in the Commonwealth. And then again at a national level as well, whenever we collectively go and talk to our leaders in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, this one focuses on us here in Pennsylvania, and just really excited. It's just a really fun day. Now, as you know, we're living in like a post-COVID world, so our LEAD day has definitely changed the last like 3 years. We used to go in person down to Harrisburg, and because of the pandemic, we've had to like change our course and have a virtual advocacy day, which is still really successful, and it's a really great way to meet with our legislators.
Yeah, and for those of you who might be wondering, like why specifically, kind of where we are in the pandemic status, like why we haven't yet gone back to in-person, or like why this year isn't in person. One, we know that, of course, like being virtual does enable us to a lot more people to participate and have those opportunities, for those who might not be able to travel to the Capitol. But more importantly, this year specifically, the legislature won't be in session basically throughout the months of March and April, because that's kind of when the governor's address is happening for the budget. And they kind of go into budget hearings that last like 6 to 8 weeks. So other than the very, very, very first like day of March when they're doing the budget address and like the last week of April, that's pretty much it for legislative session. So knowing the school schedule and how that works, then we knew that there would be no real opportunity for to make it work for students to participate. That being said, we did have a press conference last summer that was actually fairly successful in kind of pushing for some of those budget priorities to come up. And we decided to do that again. And we may have an opportunity for those who are really interested in, in going to the Capitol and that experience of sort of like, cheering for the social work profession and what's going on like in the legislative arena and really like feeling that advocacy difference. There probably will be opportunities to do so for folks who are really interested, but it'll be a much smaller crowd.
That was also a very, very wonderful event and state of like really, you try to be a social worker. We did have, I felt that we had really great turnout. The legislators that did come and speak that day as well for our press conference, great supporters of the social work profession. I believe one or two of them were actually social workers themselves on top of being legislators. So that was really encouraging because again, like that, what a great place for social workers to be, but in our state capital, right? Working as legislators or on staff, it's definitely a great place for social workers to be just because of the scope of practice that we have.
Okay, and Kristie, the next on the agenda is the testimonial. Your journey from Kutztown University student to NASW-PA president.
Yeah. So anyone on here, a KU student or a KU graduate themselves, give me a thumbs up. Woo, woo,
yeah, Morgan, there is.
Amazing. I too am a Golden Bear. I always can easily remember the year that I became a social worker because it's the same year that I had my daughter. I had our daughter 2 weeks into my final semester at Kutztown. So this is actually official. In May, it'll be 10 years that I can call myself a social worker with a BSW. So it's very exciting. But I often reflect back on like really what made me get involved with NASW, what really made me feel like, hey, I really want to be a social worker. It was attending my very first advocacy day. I was an untraditional student. So I wasn't someone that was going to school like out of high school and straight into social work. So I was older, I was already married, like again, having children, but still getting to go down to the Capitol and advocate. And at that time we were advocating for BSW licensure. So that's something that I got to see, from the time we were advocating for it to it being passed, and then actually going into practice or into law, like during my time on the board of directors for NASW-PA. What's really exciting, what was so like what I always like reflect on, in March, I'll start getting like the images of all the different lead events that I've been to. I haven't really missed, I don't think I've missed one since I was a BSW student. I've attended in person and then of course now virtual, being president of NASW-PA. But the in-person event and even the online event, I feel that we do a really great job of rallying and being able to be like advocates for what we're voicing for. Reflecting back on like the times of going to lead early on and the thoughts of like, wow, I can never see myself like getting involved in like thinking early, like there's no way I'll ever get involved in policy. There's no way that I'll ever, go talk to a legislator without a buddy with me, and that was even me at like in my early 20s, to now like being able to go and talk to them and have good conversations and advocate for what we're pushing, like what we're passionate about, right? Making real change and being leaders within our community. because we know our communities better than our legislators, right? We're the ones that are working with people in the midst of mental health crises, trying to help them get access to resources and different supports. I'm in rural Pennsylvania, so living and working in rural Pennsylvania compared to like the different cities and suburbs is very different, you know, and oftentimes our legislators might call on to us if we have a connection with them, by just meeting them, you know, either at their home offices within the areas that we reside, or even down in Harrisburg, you know, making it a point to be like, hey, I'm Kristie and I'm a social worker. You know, I know the resources in the area. These are things that we need. This is why why we're advocating is so important, you know, to residents of our area. You know, it's really great to be able to have that connection. And it's a great day whenever we have these events like LEAD, to be able to, you know, kind of get your feet wet and be able to go and talk as a group, you know, with a legislator. So it's really, it's a really empowering day. You know, despite us not being in person, you're still going to be able to make some really great connections with the legislators, with their staff. You know, it's a really empowering day and a great day to call yourself a social worker.
Thank you, Kristie. All right, I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen, and like as we kind of talk about that, what to expect and what LEAD will actually look like. I have a PowerPoint that I can share. Let's see. Hopefully this will, once I start the slideshow, it will like transition from. Okay, can you see it as the slideshow? Okay, awesome. All right, so of course, like, and I'll spend a minute on this one too, since we're since we're at that stage in the process. But I feel like a lot of folks don't engage in that legislative component of social work practice. And part of that is like social workers report like not really feeling ready to, or they feel like they lack the skills. A lot of, you know, but our code of ethics is pretty clear that that is a part of our initial practice. So of course, it's part of our ethical obligations as social workers to, first of all, just being aware of the impact of the political arena on practice, because that's definitely a piece that's missing sometimes. Like when you have conversations with social workers or social work students who aren't necessarily involved, they like the biggest chunk that's usually missing is that piece that's just the connection that says, you know, what I do as a social worker is directly impacted by what happens in the, you know, in the state legislature, in the federal, you know, in the federal Congress, like the actions of the governor, the actions of the city councils, and you know, county commissions and the school boards, et cetera, all of those things, depending on where you practice, are going to be directly impacted one way or another, whether that be like through funding, which is, you know, how a lot of social workers are paid, you know, is through government funding that goes, you know, even if it's a grant that goes to some of the private agencies, all the way down to like what we're allowed to say, what we're allowed to talk about with our clients, whether, you know, child abuse restrictions, hospital regulations, like who's allowed to be in private practice, who's not allowed to be in private practice. And it, you know, and it just goes on and on. So there very, very much is a direct connection between what we're doing in our room with clients and what is happening at the legislative arena. And at the very least, we need to be aware of those sorts of things so that when something comes up that would make it harder to do our jobs, that would hurt the clients that we serve, or conversely would make things better for the clients we serve, or easier for us to do our jobs, then, then we have a kind of that ethical obligation to advocate and improve social conditions along with just, and we're also one of the only, as far as I know, the only, we've talked with our lobbying team, who represents a lot of different firms, and it's definitely something that's different from their perspective. But in general, most associations are all about, protecting and promoting the profession. And that's definitely a big part of what we do at NASW. But we have another side to it as well, which is that we're going to protect and stand up for the clients. And because social workers work in so many different areas of practice, clients is almost literally comes down to everyone, which sort of makes our ask a little too broad sometimes. Our legislative agenda can be quite is pretty intense of well, we want to, fix everything for everybody. And it's not, but we, prioritize and we focus and we take the things that are coming up that are going to be doing the most damage. But that's definitely something that's unique about the social work profession as opposed to others, that we do have that piece of not just promoting social justice, but as it says in that first one, that we engage in social and political actions to ensure equal access for all people to meet basic human needs and to develop fully. So we kind of go beyond those other professions. Kind of going along with that, this is one of my favorite quotes from Mahatma Gandhi that says, anyone who says they are not interested in politics is like a drowning man who insists he is not interested in water. Basically that it surrounds everything we do pretty much at all times. It filters into our lives at every level. So there's no way to not be interested in politics. Huge example of that is what happened over the summer with Roe v. Wade being overturned. That one decision right there by the Supreme Court made such a difference in the ability of people to access reproductive health care. So it's definitely, whether you're for that or against it, it makes it a very clear example of how how your life can be severely impacted by the actions of our government officials. So as I said about just what is LEAD going to look like and getting ready for it, this is the second year where we're doing these trainings and programs in advance. It's something we were able to add to our it's one of the advantages of moving online. And it's also something that will almost definitely go into the future, as in even if LEAD is in person or when LEAD is back in person, it will likely only be the day of that's in person, but we can still have these online trainings in advance to really help. So I'm going to kind of go through that, but I'm also going to highlight what a couple of the ones, if you can't make them all or don't need or absolutely can't work it in your schedule or whatever to make them all, I'm going to highlight which ones I think are the most important to make. The first one, so pretty much it's the entire week before LEAD. We will have hour-long meetings from 11 to 12. All of them will be on Zoom. They will be recorded, and we make the commitment that we will publish the video and post it within 24 hours of when the program happened. So for example, if you missed the program on March 15th, you'd be able to access it by 11 a.m. on March 16th. They're open to all LEAD registrants. There's no extra registration required. That was a question that came up a lot last year because a lot of folks were like, well, I registered for LEAD, but I didn't register for this workshop or that workshop or whatever. It's all one package. And whether or not you check, we're going to ask you to check a box to say whether you plan on coming or not. But if you change your mind or if anything happens later, you're going to get the same, it's all going to be on one link. So the link that you'll do to register to come in for the one on March 14th will be the exact same Zoom link that you'll use to get into Advocacy Day itself on the 21st and all of the days in between. So you don't need to register separately. You don't need any, and you don't need different links for every day. It just use the same link. Also, when you register, or not when you register, sometime after you register, you'll get access to a LEAD participant website, which will also include that link, and it will include like appointment times for meetings with representatives and or senators, kind of broken up by school, but I'll talk about that a little bit more later. It will provide access to like documents, and all of the recordings of these sessions will then be linked to that website as well. If we have time somewhere later in the program, I can actually take you to last year's LEAD attendee website. This year's is not ready yet. Absolutely not ready yet, but but last year's is still there, and so I can kind of show you what it looked like and how it worked. All right, so
what's so great about it is you are able to like access it after, like, again, if like Johanna said, like if you're not able to make it during that time, whether it's class or if you're someone that is working, but you're still interested in the subject for that day, like we have a really wonderful panel of events that we have leading up to LEAD, and really encourage you to like check in and like watch the recordings if you're not able to make it. It's wonderful information. And again, these are all people from Pennsylvania, fellow social workers, legislators, people that are really passionate about the work that we do, and it's really great and encouraging to really listen to and to see what they have to say.
Yeah. So the first day, March 14th, that will be a little bit of the same content you're getting tonight, but you're getting it way in advance. However, it will also include like last things to know, any kind of like logistics about the setup, the meetings, etc. So that one is usually a fairly important one to have seen or to go to, because that's like the prep piece for for being ready for LEAD. Being that y'all are here and watching this particular training, you may want to check it out in video format instead of attending live, just because you'd be able to like fast forward through the parts that are more duplicative. But would certainly welcome you as well, and it will always be done with there will be enough differences and important info that we'll have access to then that we don't quite yet have a month in advance, that it will be worth checking out. The second day is going to go into detail a little bit more about just also on the 14th, you'll hear directly from our lobbying team, Angie and Natalie, that will kind of say things a little bit differently too than what you've like heard thus far, or how I would kind of express. And so it can be really good to get a lot of different perspectives about from different people who are in that legislative environment. The 15th will be more on just in general, like talking to and like doing messaging, that kind of communication piece with your elected officials. Don't have the speakers lined up for that one quite yet, so I can't tell you who's going to be on that one. The 16th is going to be social workers in public office, and that can be like at the local, state, or federal level. One of the people who's going to be with us, which is kind of the one I was basing the schedule around because I wanted to accommodate him, is our newly elected representative from the Pittsburgh area, who is a professional social worker and very much identifies as a social worker and like makes his social work credentials very well known. And that's Representative Arian Abney. And so he is going to be with us, but we'll also have folks who like work for legislators, folks who work in the governor's office. This one is more like just in general about kind of getting more involved or like what that looks like. On the 17th, Sierra McNeil, our president-elect, will be doing a presentation on the political determinants of health, which I think will be really interesting. The 20th is the other one that I would highlight as if you can only go to like if you can only go to one, you might want to go to that one as far as the things in advance, because that is when we're going to be spending a lot of time focusing on the topic that we're going to be advocating for, like what's going on with that. And that includes the sponsor of the bill in the House, Representative Mike Schlossberg, the sponsor of the bill in the Senate, Senator Maria Collette, and also our member who served as the representative on the Behavioral Health Commission, Dr. Stephanie Diaz, who's actually also a professor, is also like one of our board members and also is a professor at Penn West. But yeah, she will be able to talk about her experiences on the commission. So that one will be the deep dive on the topic. And then on the 21st, we'll go to specifically there. We're going to schedule between 9 and 11. Last year I said it was 8 to 11, but literally none of the representatives chose any time between 8 and 9. So we're just going to cut that one right out and say from 9 to 11, we're going to schedule. Oh, sorry, I used last year's presentation. So that should say meetings with House and Senate members, because we are doing both parties. So in general, your school will most likely be assigned 2 visits. We base these on the like geographical address of the school's main campus and say who are the representatives and who is the representative and the senator who represent that district. And then we ask for appointments with all 30 some odd school, for the 30 some odd schools of social work. That being said, we will inevitably have some who can't schedule an appointment for us. If we have enough warning that we can't, that they can't schedule or that they cancel whatever appointment we set up, we will maybe try to find somebody else. So it could theoretically end up being that you have an appointment with your senator, but not with your representative, or vice versa. Or that it's somebody in the area. But one of the things that we always say is that once these appointments are scheduled, there's really no outside of Zoom capacity, what can be held on Zoom, there's really no limit to who can join. So we encourage you to that if you have an interest in it, or that if for some reason your school didn't get wasn't able to schedule an appointment, to just sit in on one of the other appointments. The one message that, and I don't think it necessarily applies here per se, but the one message I will pass on that was kind of brought up to me by, I think, the legislative committee and some of our other folks, was that that if you are not a student like professors, folks who attend as professionals from the area to kind of take a step back. And like, because I heard that like one of the primary issues last year was that like sometimes folks who had like prepared presentations weren't able to give them because the discussion ended up being driven more from professionals or other folks who attended who attended the meetings. So we are going to say, you know, like just as a blanket statement to let the students kind of take the lead in some of these, especially, you know, if you've been like preparing groups. However, do be aware that sometimes, and I can see that there's at least a couple of faculty members on this on this call right now. Do be aware that there may be, especially in the Senate, but even in the House a little bit, there are places where more than one school is in the same district. So like more, so we definitely have some overlap. So there will be places where it may be like a student group from this school is prepared to speak, and a group from another university is also prepared to speak. And there's no I mean, we can share that information in advance potentially, but in general, there's usually, you kind of have to navigate that on the spot. So that's just one piece to be aware of. The other thing I wanted to say, is that we always, because we do make the reservation, we do kind of make those visits for every school of social work, even ones who have not attended in the past, have not traditionally been involved with LEAD, might not be involved, might not have any intention of being involved with LEAD. And we will cancel some of those appointments if we get in enough advance notice, but there will always be ones where it's like me on the, you know, on a visit, or something like that. Yeah, or Kristie, who has done that before too. So we may be able to like kind of help steer folks who are interested in going on some of those extra sessions to be like, hey, maybe go to like this one because we don't have any students registered from this school. Kristie, did you want to add anything? I'll also take us, you know, because that was a ton of information, although it was recorded, so you can review it later. But I'll also, that seems like a good chance to like ask any questions if anybody's got any at this point.
Yeah, I think the big thing just to remember is like, you know, it's okay to have conversations, you know, with the legislators and the staff. And you know, again, if you're a student that's attending, you know, they're gonna understand that you might be nervous, right? And but just think about the skill set that you have and the communication skills that you have, and like just think about it like you're talking, you know, with like in the practice classes that you have. You know, be confident in what you have to share, right? Because you're the expert in that room about that subject, about being a social worker, right? And that's a lot to be excited about and a lot to share.
Okay, so any questions about like the logistics of things at this point?
I have a somewhat personal question. Sorry. I'm not from Pennsylvania. Is it possible to join? Like, is it okay if I join you? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a student in New York. So my professor referred me and she offered that I'll join here to this day, but it like talking, and as you're talking, it's like, I was like wondering if if I have a
Yeah.
place.
It is very Pennsylvania specific, but as long as that doesn't bother you, then you're welcome to join us.
No, I would love to hear the topics that you're raising. I assume it's we can all relate.
Yes,
Even
very
here.
for
So,
sure.
yeah, so thank you. No.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a very interesting concept, right? A lot of our schools now are virtual, even here in the Commonwealth. So we might have students that, they're attending a Pennsylvania school, but you might not be from Pennsylvania. Like you said, you're from New York right now. Yeah. So, just kind of keeping that in mind, you can still contribute, right? If you know what we're talking about. And again, just talking about the profession itself, and what we have to offer in our areas, that's something, if you feel like you want to contribute, you're able to.
And if I'm already talking, I have another question. Are you the one who picks the topic at hand, or is it something that is predicted, or how does it work?
The topic is chosen kind of through, it's not as formal a process as maybe it should be, but it's kind of through a discussion between our lobbying firm about what's the best kind of use of folks' time, what's going to be the most significant issue. And it's something that we we do try to limit it to one, and sometimes folks kind of lead with the impression that that we're only advocating for one thing, and that is definitely not the case. We have, as I said, a fairly large legislative agenda, but we always have kind of what the most significant thing is. And when I say significant, because that can be too, it's not necessarily what the most important issue is, because there's a lot of issues that I think would be super, super important to me. But if they don't really, if they're not at a spot, if as a bill, they're not at a spot where, where us advocating really could make a difference. If it's a bill that doesn't have a chance of, that really doesn't have a chance of going anywhere because it doesn't have the support it needs, or for that matter, even if there's just another bill that is being highly prioritized by the legislature and, is being, where we do have the ability to make an impact on and kind of shape what that looks like, then that's going to be what we pick. So usually it's that it can be sometimes our entire board of directors, but more frequently it's our executive committee, or even just our president-elect, and our lobbying team. Our legislative chair is involved in the discussion as well, and that's actually Tim Seith from Kutztown University, professor and former legislator, is our legislative chair. And that's kind of how that goes. And so last year it was telehealth, because we definitely felt like there was a big issue with, the pandemic kind of getting wrapped up, and some of those waivers going out, and having telehealth be more of a concern, because there's still, even to this day, is not a comprehensive statewide telehealth bill, and we're hoping that will change. But as we'll kind of get to closer to the end of the presentation, that's not, even though that still is an issue and still is important, it's not the lowest, it's not what the focus is this year, just because we wanted to prioritize the issue that's kind of definitely one that has risen to the top. Registration should be open this week, especially knowing that there are some faculty members on the call. One of the things to know is that we kind of, I don't know, beta tested in a way a program last year that we're definitely going to make available to everyone this year, just because it did work for some folks. which is that if because like we had schools who had certain amount of money allocated, and then they were like, well, let us know when we get to this number of registrations, that way we can cut it off because we can't pay for any more. And we just kind of set it as like, once you had over 100, over 100 attendees, that like we wouldn't stop it beyond that. So now we're kind of making it more official and say, like, if the university pays $1,000, which is the cost for 100 lead attendees, then unlimited students can attend. If it's a smaller campus where that wouldn't be applicable, then you can reach out to me and we can maybe set something else up where like maybe you don't even have anywhere close to 100 students, and and we can take it from there. But that's but for the average university, that's kind of where we're going to sit with that $1,000 will get you unlimited registration for any of your students to attend. And as I said, registration should be up soon. If you did want to take advantage of that deal for the school, then that is done directly through Alicia at our office, and she can just set it up as an invoice. And then we kind of covered a lot of this, like the trainings, like how to sign up and what do you do if you miss it and how do you access that and all of that. We covered that before. You think it would be helpful, and I can see most folks, so just sort of nod or write in the chat or shake your head or whatever. But would it be helpful to kind of go to that lead resource page that we set up last year and just to see what that looks like? Okay. All right. Yeah. Happy to do that. I'm going to have to stop sharing and then reshare because I was only on that one page. All right, so got that one up. So just sharing my screen again. All right, so this was the link that went out to all of the lead attendees. You can see everything's still dated for 2022, so that makes sense. And then it kind of, as you go down, it talks about like what the focus is for the bill and the schedule and like the programming, kind of like we already went through, and that's kind of what it was last year. When after the recordings, it has, you see this link for view the recordings here. It took you to another site that's still, and I know my face is on like practically all of them. Like I wasn't the main speaker, but I did at least say hi on all of them, and somehow I'm on like, yeah, it's just my face. Anyway, so yeah, those videos are there from last year and are still available. Sorry, my Kristie, what can you see right now on the screen?
It says lead 2022 focus, lead
okay.
agenda and schedule.
Got it. I was like trying to get back to that screen, and like that wasn't what I saw on my screen, so that's good. You were at the right place. Okay, so yeah, so it'll be kind of like that, where like the links to the recordings will be in a very similar spot, and then it'll have that, view recordings here to get to it. We'll put together a booklet very much like this one. That's on, that's one of those like booklets that you can like just kind of click through and it's all on the screen. Or you can download a PDF of the booklet. Again, haven't gotten that. That is not completely ready, but it will be. Then here's like the meeting with your legislator and Zoom information. So it just kind of goes down. Oh, okay. So for example, for the representative, Cabrini and Eastern were ones who share a representative. Probably this year, since we're doing representatives and senators, last year when we were doing telehealth, the bill had already passed the Senate, so there was no point in having meetings with senators, so we only did representatives. But that's kind of not the situation this time. So we will be doing both senators and reps. So it'll probably be more like individual by university as opposed to having those like joint ones. Because probably if your rep is the same, that doesn't necessarily mean your senator will be the same, just because of the way the districts are drawn. And so you see like it has the university name. So just to pull an example, Kutztown University had a meeting with Representative Gary Day at 9:30, and then it had the link for click here to join meeting, but then it also had like the meeting number and passcode in case anyone was having difficulty getting in. As far as I know, the only time we had difficulty getting in was that we had one that like more than 100 students were attending. The lead account kind of tapped out, and we had to like upgrade it in the middle of the meeting, which we were able to do. But yeah, that was the only time like we had significant issues. And then you see here, there's like places where it's like the rep where the canceled, or either because we didn't have any students, so we said we're just gonna try to cancel this one out, or where the representative had to cancel at the last minute. And we get these announcements all the way up until like 10 minutes before lead. Sometimes even, or like definitely the day before. Sometimes it's like 15 minutes before the meeting starts. So we'll try to log in and be present with folks to say what's going on, or to like say join another meeting. But we also like a quick way of doing it is just to post it on this website. And then we also have like voting information for registering to vote and that sort of thing. That one's just like FYI, but we will probably leave that on, I'm sure. So yeah, the big piece of what we're going to be doing between now and then is scheduling all of these meetings and getting all of those link things available, as well as like putting the booklet together and and lining up those last speakers for lead. Then the day the on lead, we'll still have another meeting from 11 to 12. That one will be the rally, quote unquote. But it's less of, with Zoom, it's less of like all of us getting together and, chanting or anything like that, because that's kind of not how Zoom works. But it's a little bit more of like we have legislators join us. We sometimes get video messages. Like last year we had video messages both from Governor Wolf and Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, who of course is now Senator Fetterman. We had Josh Shapiro join us in person for a bit, in addition to like several legislators, members of the House and Senate, all of whom were saying like what social work means to them and to our communities. And it was really great to have all of like so many of them join live. And that's kind of what wraps us up for the week. Kristie, I've kind of been talking for a bit, so.
It's all good. That's your part of the presentation, right?
I know.
Yeah.
Like, so anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, again, like it's really great to see the you know, whether we have our legislators at our rally in person or the videos that are sent in. They're really it's really wonderful to see the you know, see the impact that we are making within our communities in the state as well. You know, the one from Fetterman last year and Governor Wolf, they were just really, you know, really beautiful and touching, and a lot of people really thought that was pretty great, you know, that we were able to have messages from them.
Yeah. So that's really kind of the resources provided to attendees, is that there's a whole lot of you know, the stuff on the and unfortunately, I will say, like, well, especially with the visits, you know, we always hear from students, attendees, professors, really too, all of them. We hear from everybody more or less to say, like, they would love to have more time to, like, know when their appointments are going to be and like that sort of thing. We will like post those as soon as we have them, but like I said, with me dealing with the legislator, there is a lot of last minute stuff and things where we get meetings that I remember at least 2 or 3 examples last year of times where folks said, well, I can't meet at 9 anymore because we just had a meeting scheduled come up for, you know, for the committee I'm on, but I can meet at 10:30. Can you meet at, you know, and I would go in and like change the appointment time on the thing, but it would literally sometimes be like an hour before, you know, before the like before the train, you know, before the meeting was supposed to be started. And I would imagine that there were a lot of folks who you know, especially if that went the other way, who might have been scheduled to be on, who might have missed it because of just the legislator changing their mind all of a sudden. The other thing we frequently get asked, and this is kind of really this is the other side of things, from the legislator's side, we are almost constantly being asked for a list of the attendees who will be present. Or at the very least, the list of constituents of the representative who will be present at the meeting. And I'm always kind of putting them off until the last minute, because folks tend to register even like up until like a couple of days before lead. We'll still be getting lots of registrations in. So we kind of try to send those out in bulk right beforehand, but definitely kind of be aware of that. And if there, you know, if there is a way, like I said, registration not quite open yet, so I can't actively push you to go register now. But I can say that like once registration is open, which will definitely be this week, you know, the earlier that you can get yourself, your friends, your classes, your students, your groups registered, kind of the better it works for everything overall, just so that we kind of know who's going to be there and are able to get the word to the legislators about who to expect from the universities that they represent. Preparation, yeah, that's one of those pieces. Knowing, that's one of the reasons why we're having this training, because that's another one of the big questions that we get from folks in advance of lead, is like, when, you know, what bill are we going to advocate for? Like, why are we advocating for it? Like, can we give students more time to like sit with this issue? I described that process earlier about how it gets chosen, and sometimes, you know, sometimes with the legislature moving as swiftly as it does, sometimes you just don't know like what's going to be happening or what's going to be significant at that point in time. if you guys have been following at all what's been happening in Pennsylvania these last couple of months, you know, we had our election, and then there was a dispute between who's in the majority after like a couple of seats went vacant. And so therefore, like the House of Representatives, which I think went back into session today, so maybe even some of these issues have been resolved. And I just haven't read the update yet myself, but they've been kind of going without rules. They've been, you know, they've been unable to form committees. They've been unable to assign staff to folks because they couldn't get like a clear answer about the majority when there were like a few seats vacant. Those seats have now been filled following the special election. And so now it is pretty clear in the House that it's a 1-seat majority for the Democrats. Of course, that could 1-seat majority is very tenuous. That could change at any point. Somebody could, you know, somebody could change party. Somebody could have an accident and have to drop out. You know, all sorts of things could happen. Somebody could get appointed to the, you know, to the Biden administration, you know, like all sorts of things could happen that would like then throw that majority under the bus and would change like the leadership all over from scratch. So just as an example of how things are moving sometimes very slowly, sometimes very swiftly. Yeah, there was constitutional amendments that came up last year, like ones that we would not be in favor of. I won't go into detail. You're either familiar with, you know, you may be familiar with them, maybe not. But the point is, there were these constitutional amendments last year, and like they went from 0 to like they didn't exist to having passed like both houses within like 24 to 48 hours. So I mean, it was amazing to me, even because there's a lot of like, oh, well, you know, this bill's going to take time, you know, but when they're motivated to do something, it happens like immediately. So, yeah, it's a whole lot of waiting and a whole lot of, and then some like speed where you're trying to catch up with like, what on earth is going on? And that's why we depend on our lobbying team, but it's also why the bills are the way they are. But that being said, we are pretty clear about what's going to happen this time, and we can go into that a little bit more. Let's see. I'm not going to do too much of the like just how to lobby piece. I'll save that for the March 14th training, but like just suffice it to say that in-person visits with your legislator are like by far, like lots of other words to emphasize that, the most effective way of like connecting with your legislator, far more significant than phone calls, letters, etc. Although all of that is good too, and will, you know, and I love giving trainings, etc., about how to do any of these pieces, or just like effective communication with your legislator. Something I'm kind of always willing to do. There's the quick little acronym. I got this from Tim Sipe, former representative and legislative chair. Yeah. Who puts it in a quick little acronym of the how to lobby, which is just remember your hat. And that's basically doing your homework in advance, like, and that's not just about the bill, that's also like about the legislator that you're meeting with, like what's their interests, what's their positions, are there things that you might connect with them on, are there things you have in common, like, or that you have in common with their family. Like there's a whole bunch of we only have one social worker in office right now, but we have a lot of folks who have social workers in their families or social workers on their staff. And so there's sometimes like just knowing that. For example, Representative Frankel, his wife is a committed social worker, an NASW member. And, and every time we meet with Representative Frankel, it's always, oh yeah, my wife is a social worker. And I'm like, yeah, and his daughter too, I believe. Also a social worker. So, Malcolm Kenyatta, his mother is a social worker. So, just sort of a couple of those random ones that I know off the top of my head. And there's others who have social workers who work in their offices. Sometimes it's like that you might have like served in the military with somebody, or like go to the, have connections in the same church, or, whatever. Knowing as much as you can about the representative can help make those connections. The other thing that Tim emphasized is having an ask, so you're not just talking about the bill, you're asking for something specific. In this case, what I can share is that, unless you're talking to somebody who clearly does not support the issue, what you're going to be asking for is if they're willing to co-sponsor, because right now it's all in co-sponsor memos where they're collecting co-sponsors. So you'll be asking them if they're willing to sign on as a co-sponsor. And then the third thing that he mentioned is the thank you, which is that a lot of our public officials don't get thanked. They get yelled at, they get criticized, but they don't get a lot of thank yous. So whether you can incorporate that in your visit originally of being like, oh, if you did your homework and for example, that they supported a bill that you were strongly in favor of or something like that, that you can incorporate that thank you to be like, thank you for supporting this bill last year, or we were glad to be a part of it, like that sort of thing. Or even just afterwards, the thank you for the meeting, thank you for your service, like being willing to do this job for like sometimes not a lot of recognition, that sort of thing. Frequently, even if I'm talking to a member that I might otherwise disagree with, sometimes we just have shared interests, even if we don't agree on the approach. Like they may be very passionate about children's issues, even if I might be strongly opposed to what they want to do about children's issues, I can still sort of commend them for their interest in making in improving things for our children, and even kind of acknowledging that we might not agree on how to get there, but that that this is an important issue, and so we do at least agree on that. And we've touched base on a bunch of these, so kind of knowing like those the pieces that I would say here for emphasis are, hold on just a sec, that piece about saying I don't know if needed, like if you get asked a question that you don't know the answer to, being purely open about the fact that you don't know, and that's fine. And then just kind of make a note of that, like what the question was. You can always get that back to me, to our lobbying team, etc. And either we can like find the answer for you, and then you can get it back to the representative or the senator if you're willing to do that follow-up, or we can do the follow-up too. That would be another option, just letting us know that question happened, that you didn't know the answer or what to do. But that can actually be really good, because it gives us that opportunity to have a repeated interaction with them, to have like a second contact and follow up with them, to say like, hey, we're getting back with you about that question that you asked during that training or during that meeting.
And like it's easy to get a hold of us like through email that day.
Yeah.
And we'll have that posted. It's on our, like, it's on the website now that and I'll post it in like the chat section too, towards the end of this on, with our contact information.
Yeah, very, very true. The other pieces I would say in here, about that personal stories of impact, that's probably the other biggest point out of all of that. Like anytime that you have a story that you can share, that relates or connects in any way, I think that's one of those things in general. I was actually just today ran across an ad for somebody that was like selling a storytelling thing, because they were like, get out of those like boring PowerPoint presentations and do something that, you know, that will connect with your audience more. So like that applies, all of those rules apply to legislators too. They're far more likely, as opposed to going through like a fact sheet or a list of talking points, etc. Those can be super important, but knowing those, but having like a way to bring it home to our legislators as people is going to be a lot more memorable. And I know that's sometimes easier to do with some things that, you know, with some issues than others. Like with telehealth, we were able to give a lot of like very real world examples of clients who had been directly positively impacted by telehealth, and like why they were able to be, you know, served in telehealth in ways that they couldn't be served, you know, through traditional means, that far extended beyond the pandemic. Like what we're going to be talking about here is going to be more like the possibilities of what this could bring. So we're going to have to dig a little deeper to find to find some of those stories to connect. But definitely, like if you have them, if it's like stories that happen to you, stories that happen to your family, stories that happen to clients, obviously protecting confidentiality. But you know, being able to speak of it in very general terms, like we had a client who was a mother of 2 small children, blah, 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 you know, you're able to protect identities fairly well. Okay, and then this piece just kind of talks about the long road to getting bills passed. I think as we get into the issue itself, which is where we're going to be next, it's like a key example of this, because I'll tell you the history of kind of what happened as we get in. But but yeah, persistence, tenacity, and patience. Like the something that should have been a no-brainer is one that, you know, instead we still are having to deal with a year later. And we'll talk about that too. But the one thing to know, whether it's yourself as a student or a participant, or whether you're talking to as a faculty member with a bunch of students, is that a lot of them will leave the experience kind of like not really certain if they did anything. And that's been fairly common, like from the beginning of like in doing the LEAD program. But that being said, there have been bills that weren't going anywhere prior to LEAD that then afterwards, like it was when the momentum got started for things really like churning, that made something pass later that same year. You know, and or even when we're, you know, into a several year process, that LEAD always kind of gets the ball rolling. So it's really easy to underestimate your impact of feeling like you didn't do anything, feeling like you know, having that little bit of intimidation for talking to elected officials who are supposedly experts on everything, even though, you know, they're definitely not as expert on social work as you are, guarantee that. Yeah, like even if you're only in like social work 101, unless it's like Arian Abney, then you're the expert in the room when it comes to talking about social work. But because it is easy to underestimate your impact, and because of just, you know, imposter syndrome and whatnot, folks sometimes come out of it feeling frustrated. But we try to pump folks up and say, you know, like, we know that there's a difference that's made from this, and maybe it's cumulative, you know, all of us working together. Maybe it's something specifically that you did or said that could make an impact in the long run. But it's definitely there. And it's, you know, it's far easier to do nothing than something. So anytime that we're trying to do something, you know, it's gonna take some hard work. All right. And then, yeah, with like only about 10% or 5% of bills were get passed. So that's one thing to know. And frequently it's a multi-year process, and the vast majority of the bills filed just sit there, having been filed without even getting a single hearing. Which is why, like, you know, you can find bills, for example, that are about great things, you know, that wonderful things that would be fabulous. And you might go like, well, why aren't you advocating for that issue? And kind of like building on what I said in the past, you know, unless the bill at least shows some possibility of getting some momentum, it might be the best bill in the world. But if we can't get it, you know, if we can, you know, we can start doing a lot of like small things to try to build it up, like in our legislative advocacy, you know, tools, and it's not like we won't be speaking out for it. But we can, you know, the pieces that we can do sometimes mean we're going to take what you know, what might have a little bit more momentum behind it, so that we can just push it past the finish line. Oh yeah, and like, for example, one of the last bills that NASW led and got passed, it took us 10 years to pass. So just as an example of how that can be a very long-term process. And sometimes it's about recognizing, you know, the environment that you're in, you know, like if you're if one party is very anti-regulation, for example, it's probably not a good idea to bring in the you know, to bring up something like a licensure bill that year, if one party is going to, you know, is in charge and would have the ability to do something, because that might have negative impacts. Kind of similarly, you know, where we are with having like a split 1-seat majority in like the Democrats currently have a 1-seat majority in the House. The Republicans still have the majority in the Senate, and the Democrats have the majority, well, have the executive office with Governor Shapiro. So the likelihood of getting big swings one way or the other is fairly minimal right now, because everything will have to go through things that were approved by both parties. So anything that we're going to advocate for now is like, again, not that we won't be very open about our opinions and about where we stand on issues, but as far as like what our big advocacy pushes are going to be, it's probably going to be for things that have like some measure of bipartisan support, because that'll be the thing that will be most likely to get passed in this legislative environment. In the meantime, we can still be involved in PACE and other things to get people in office of people who support our broader legislative priorities, so that in the long term, you know, that we can work towards having some of those other things happen. All right, so the issue this year, there's a package of funding that was passed, well, that was part of the budget last year, and it's set aside for it's current, it was, that piece of things was passed. It was set aside for, it's like federal money, and it's set aside for behavioral health and workforce development funding. There was a commission that was established by that same piece that created a behavioral health commission for drawing up recommendations. That commission did meet for 17, 20 hours and did create a list of recommendations that was intended to go back and be immediately like approved as part of the budget. Because again, it's the money is already set aside. So that piece of things is accurate. And then at the end of last session, there was a lot of, well, one, it was very close to the election. So there was like kind of a lack of initiative about wanting to do anything. Additionally, there was, you know, some folks who, even though it was like a group of experts who met in the commission, who were kind of like, well, how do we know that that's really the best approach? Or like, maybe we should do different things with that money, and we really need to look at it further, and stuff like that. So there's not a bill number to go along with this right now, because there's not a bill number for most things, because we're still early in this legislative session. What there are is what's called co-sponsor memos. And there is a co-sponsor memo. I'm gonna go to like new share and go to sharing my screen as a whole, so I can bounce between things for a minute. See if I can get out of the PowerPoint. There we go. So on the similarly, where we have this yeah, the thing, there's like under Representative Schlossberg, he has this one. It's under the subject line of time to fix Pennsylvania's broken mental health care. The same thing is found in the Senate on Representative Colette's page. And it and I'll zoom in a bit here, because this is fairly explicit about what it does. Yeah, it would create like you can't read the bill, because again, it's not a bill number yet. So this co-sponsor memo is really kind of saying what the intent of it is. And it would be to add 37 million towards workforce development, 23.5 million to improve criminal justice system and public safety systems, specifically kind of in regards to like people who are mentally ill, and like the number of how mentally ill folks are approached when in law enforcement, and or how they're dealt with afterwards. The 39 million to expand access and service delivery, and then another 500,000 for just evaluation after the fact. Another significant piece out of this, well, like this is the Senate version. It says exactly the same thing, word for word. So it's a shared co-sponsor memo. That one does also provide a link to the Behavioral Health Commission's report, which we were actually just talking about that. We had a meeting with our interns and our lobbyists today, and like the report itself is like 11 pages, but it's really only a very few pages on the recommendations, because the first like, you know, cover page, whatever, the first few pages are all like about the report and the leadership, etc. And so it's not until page 5 when it starts on the recommendations, it spells those out in a bit more detail. And then page 9 is where the recommendations piece ends. So if somebody were reading pages 5 through 9, they would have a pretty decent idea about what the recommendations were from this Behavioral Health Commission. And like I said, our representative on that Behavioral Health Commission was Stephanie Diaz, and she will be available at the deep dive that we're doing on this to talk about this experience a bit more. Kristie, do you want to add anything here?
No, I was just looking at the time. We have about 6 minutes left.
Ah, well, we'll definitely, I think we're fairly good as far as those things go. I mean, these are all things that are available online now. When we do get out the registration, etc., on LEAD, we're going to have links to, to this report that students will be able to access. But like I said, you can access it right now if you go to like the House or Senate page and look up that co-sponsor memo, and you get the link to it. Actually, Schlossberg's co-sponsor memo does not have the link. The Colette's in the Senate is the one that has the link.
I highly encourage you, if you have time, check it out. It's a really great report. A lot of work was put into it, and just looking forward to it passing so that the funds can be utilized.
Yeah, and I mean, we made the commitment last year that we were, especially with Representative Schlossberg, he's been such a champion of mental health, and is a very strong ally of NASW. So even if there were like smidgen pieces of this that we might not 100% agree with, it's definitely like what was the composite result of like the commission and how they as a whole decided, so we made our commitment that we're kind of all in on this, that we're completely on board. And we have again, our message is like, well, let's get it passed, let's get it done. But also, like, since it is in co-sponsor memo form right now, it's real easy if you're meeting with somebody and they otherwise seem supportive of the bill and are like, yeah, like we should totally do this, and be like, hey, well, are you willing to be a co-sponsor? And I would imagine that we'll lead with at least a few commitments for additional co-sponsors. All right, well, there's our wrap up. Like, I think we're to the wrap up point, and Kristie, I have been talking enough, so I will.
I know, you've been so
that is all tonight. You.
Yeah. So, of course, thank you all for being here with us tonight. We're really looking forward to the events that we have coming up in the next couple weeks. Of course, LEAD sits in Social Work Month, and that's just a great month to celebrate the profession that we love, the one that if you are a student that you're preparing to enter, and it's something to really be proud of. As we have signups coming up shortly for LEAD, we're going to have other events as well throughout the month of March to celebrate our profession. Make sure that you tune in for the events again leading up to LEAD, of course, the day of. And if you have any questions, please reach out. And I think even today, if there's anything that you have questions, we can hang on just a little bit longer. Yeah, we're done.
I know. Sorry, we can sign off as a whole and say, all right, we're going to end the meeting and stop the recording and all of that. But if anybody has questions and would like to hang out for a minute, we'll stick around.
Yeah, definitely. But thank you all for being here.
Thank you.